Alright, the Wolves had matchup issues that caused them a lot of issues, because without Rudy, and then losing Nas early, they had to change their coverages throughout, especially for Jaden, so he had a lot of responsibilities defensively. Initially, he was assigned to Fox, but then he was basically a makeshift big for the majority of the first half, and then at times late in the third, because they were using him as a rim protector. That had a serious trickle effect, and first, it was showing in the Spurs ball screens, because whenever he dropped, the Spurs guards were eating that space. Then whenever he switched, that was giving Wemby a mismatch to exploit, so neither coverage was effective. Then second, it was hard to guard Wemby, and it was even harder for him to box out Wemby or Cornet, because even though he's got length, he was still giving up a lot of size. So that was one of the reasons for the Spurs dominating the O boards. The other was the Wolves zoning up throughout, because that was their way of covering more ground going small, but that's always going to make it difficult to track crashers. So that was another reason for the Spurs dominating the O boards. And to make matters worse, their zone wasn't even helping them get stops. Then third, assigning Jaden onto their bigs meant Drew couldn't be Wemby's primary defender, and Ant had to cover Fox, so Fox was able to exploit that matchup because he either blew by Ant or got to his spots off his ball screens. That was one of the main reasons he got going more than the last matchup, and the other reason was the Spurs' pace, because the Spurs were able to catch the Wolves' defense not being set throughout, so whenever they pushed the rock, they made the Wolves pay. It was even somewhat the same in the half court, because whenever the Wolves had a breakdown in their coverages or were in help, they found their shooters on sprays, so they basically got whatever they wanted, especially in the second, and a lot of that was stemming from Wemby. The only way to discomfort him is physicality, and with Drew off him, he didn't hesitate to pull, because no amount of length is going to be enough to truly contest his shots. So he probably didn't see Jaden on a lot of his jumpers. But his size was causing just as many problems on the other end, because without Rudy as the primary screener, the Wolves weren't really looking for many screening actions in the first half, so they couldn't drag him or Cornet away from the paint, and those two basically got to babysit it. All the Spurs guards had to do was man up on the rock and stay at home off it, because without the screens, the Wolves couldn't put them in rotation, so as long as they stayed in front of their man and were hugged up, they wouldn't be forced to scramble. And even when one of them did get beat off the dribble, Wemby or Cornet were always ready to protect the rim. That just caused the Wolves' offense to stagnate, so they had to either rely on a quick bucket in transition, especially from Jaden pushing the rock, or Ant making tough shots in the half court, because the Spurs were tilting the post, and that made it hard for Drew to ever get going. He wasn't able to exploit any mismatches he had, and it took until the second half before he could start getting to the line. So in the first half, it was basically on Ant to keep the Wolves afloat offensively, because he had to be quick on the catch, or just had to beat the load up on his clear sides. He was making ridiculous twos, and then in the third, he started making threes, because they kept a big out there at all times, so he was getting more screening actions to exploit. They were making a concerted effort to get him ball screens or backsides, because Wemby was mostly in a drop, so he was getting clean looks from deep once he turned the corner, and those just led to him going on a heater. A lot of his shots in the fourth were similar to his shots in the first half, because some of those were on dead possessions, and just dependent on his shot making. So there was nothing the Spurs could have really done, especially on the left wing. Even when the Spurs loaded up or tilted the post, he was still making the right pass, so he was able to find Chenzo for a couple crucial trays down the wire, and he single-handedly damn near ran it back for the Wolves, but they just couldn't get a couple extra stops on the other end. At least they were able to start stabilizing the game in the second half, because as I said earlier, they were keeping a big on the floor more, so they mashed up a lot better, and even in their small ball, they were just switching 1 through 5. They just kept their defense simple, instead of trying to constantly mix up their coverages and matchups. So the Spurs offense started stagnating, especially in the fourth, and they had to basically rely on shot making themselves. A lot of that stemmed from Fox and Wemby, because the rock was obviously going to be in their hands down the wire, and them going to their two-man game at times. But even Keldon made a couple crucial trades of his own. Per usual, he was aggressive as soon as he subbed in, so it wasn't that shocking to see him make those clutch shots, because he was already in a slight rhythm from his downhill play throughout the night, and this performance just adds to his campaign for Sixth Man of the Year. Even though Wemby is the star and Fox is the second fiddle, he has been an unsung hero at times, and even though Ant scored the 5th double nickel of the year, he's the first to do it without the win attached because of those three. Just watch the tape.